So we are going first to talk about a specific technique that we have found previously that basically led to the development of this tool that we will be releasing today. And we have used this technique now for 4 years or so. So it's been a technique that we have had a lot of mileage on, to be honest. After going through this technique, we will show a demo of this tool, and we'll also cover some additional capabilities that we have found during this journey of developing this framework that Chris will cover in the end. That is super interesting. So to explain this technique really simplified before we go ahead and deep dive a little into this, it is basically a technique that allows us to set one registry value and basically turn Outlook into something you can remotely control using a C2 framework. And it's basically just a web viewer inside Outlook. All right, so before we get started, we quickly want to just introduce ourselves. My name is Oddvar. I work as a red teamer here at TrustedSec. I've been doing that for some time now, but I have been I've been doing that for the last, trying to think now, 6 years or so. For the 24, I have worked with IT for over 24 years, and mostly within security. I consider myself a hacker. I do some blogging every now and then. As often as I can, I do speaking engagements, do a little bit security research, and I enjoy horrible dad jokes, and I tend to create some memes every now and then. I think that's fun. Other than that, my hobbies are fishing with a pole and not a keyboard. I enjoy 3D printing, some gaming every now and then, barbecue, and as of recently, I also started diving into metal detecting. So I'm going to let Chris introduce himself.
Yep. So I'm Christopher Paschen. I'm the current research practice lead at TrustedSec. I've been doing red teaming tool capability development for the last 8 years. I'm one of the core developers on our capabilities here at TrustedSec, so that includes things like Specula that we're releasing out there now, or our in-house implant that we use as like a follow-on. Some of my hobbies include hiking, generally getting outdoors, gaming in all of its various forms, and I enjoy cooking a good meal. So back to you.
Thanks. Okay, so you might ask, why are we doing this? Elsie told us not to. I'm just kidding. But we have been using this technique for a while now, and as you all know, releasing tools is almost certain a death of the tool. But at the same time, this technique has been known for quite some time, and knowledge and preventions do already exist around this specific technique. So we wanted to use this webinar as a way to raise awareness of this technique, as well as also give the community a new tool they can play with that still can be used for a while longer. So we want to release the tool before it's completely unusable. So that's the reason we're doing this, for the better. And some names we want to mention that has done incredible work on this specific technique and topic. This technique itself was initially discovered by Etienne Stelmans when he basically showed how to use the Outlook homepage as an attack vector with his ruler tool, which he also wrote as part of this, and has a lot of incredible functionality. I'm going to go over the ruler a little bit in detail in the next slides, but just want to mention him specifically. And also Ben Wilson, he did an interesting blog about specifically using Outlook today to render Outlook homepage. So we just want to give a shout out to them. Kudos to them. Good job. So ruler. I'm not sure if everybody knows about this tool, but this was released a few years back, where this was really targeted against on-premise Exchange servers, where you could basically use this tool to enumerate valid users. You could use it to spray, and if you were lucky, you could get credentials. And if you got credentials, you could basically connect through Outlook web client and pull down the global address list, and then you can do some more spraying and stuff like that. What it's most known for, though, is the and thereby the name ruler, is that you can create malicious mail rules. What that basically means is that you could, if you had valid credentials, you could basically create an Outlook rule through the web client using this tool, and it would get synchronized down to the Outlook full client on the desktop. And then you could set up trigger actions so that you could have like a subject that says Chris or TrustedSec or whatever. And whenever that mail got sent into the inbox, it would trigger the rule and code got executed. So that is probably what it is most known for. What we are going to focus on today, though, is the technique where it uses the Outlook homepage part, because this is kind of the primer for our technique. So we just want to cover that a little more thorough before we head into the tool itself. So basically, the back before when this tool was released and this functionality was there that you could abuse it, you could actually right-click on either inbox, sent items, drafts, junk email, whatever folder you have in the Outlook inbox, or sorry, in the Outlook mailbox. You could right-click, go properties, and then you could basically set a homepage. You had a specific tab there that you could basically click on, and then you could turn that on with a check mark, and then you could specify an external URL. And that way, you change the behavior of that folder inside the mailbox. So to do that, or the reason for Microsoft for adding this, by the way, is to more easily integrate applications and stuff. So like, for instance, if you wanted to have intranet site on the top of your mailbox, like at the top of your inbox, you could easily add that. Or if you want a SharePoint or some custom app, it would be pretty easy to do that. And it's basically HTML programming, so it doesn't take a lot of developer experience to create something. So I see their perspective, and that's the reason why it's there. To use the ruler tool back in the day, you use the ruler -- email, and then the email address of the target you had access to. You use the module homepage, the verb add, and then you specify -- URL, and then you pointed it to an external server that you controlled, where you basically hosted a file. And that file looked like this. It's a super simple sample taken from Ethan's blog, where this is basically just an example that shows how to run Notepad through this. So you have your typical HTML tags at the top there, HTML head, meta, title, and then you have the script tag, which where things starts to get interesting. So you have the client event handlers, VBS, language is set to VBScript, and then you have a sub that's called window on load. And whenever somebody clicks on the inbox in this example and loads the HTML part, which you see on the screen here, it will always run that sub as part of the process. And whenever that sub is ran, you can see here that it does some VBScript stuff, typical stuff like set application. It points to view CTL. In this example, you see at the bottom here, the ID view CTL points back to the CL/SID of the Outlook ActiveX component. So by setting application to that, you access the Outlook application, and after that, he uses the set CMD to use that application object to create an object and connect to the VScript shell part of VBScript. And from there, he could do the run, and there he can basically just launch an application. Just a super simple example of what you could do with the homepage. This, of course, got fixed in 2017 with a patch or the CVE was dubbed CVE 2017-11-774. Ethan Stallman's got a knowledge for this one, and there's a knowledge base article 40-111-62 that has more details about this. What the patch did, though, is it basically removed the entire homepage feature part of Outlook, so you couldn't longer set it through the Outlook web client. That's basically what they removed. So on the left side, how it was before the patch. On the right side, even though it's in Norwegian, you can see it how it was after the patch. You see the tab for homepage is gone. But it raises the question, though. Was it really fixed? And of course, since you're on this webinar, you probably already know the answer to this. It wasn't fixed. But Sam Link, a coworker of ours that work at the target operations team, found in 2018 that that the fix could actually be reversed itself. So meaning the things they did to remove the stuff could be reversed. So he started looking at what the patch did. I'm pretty sure he used procmon and all sorts of stuff to figure this out. But what he eventually found out was that you could use, you could set a registry dword value inside the HKCU hive, the current user hive, meaning that the user can set this himself. You don't need to be an admin because the normal user has access to his own hive. Under software, Microsoft Office, the version of Office, Outlook Security, this is where you set the dword value of enable roaming folder homepages to the value of 1. If you do that, the homepage tab reappears in the GUI for some reason. So that was kind of interesting. But the most interesting part, though, was that he found also this, that you could also add the web view and then a folder as a key, and then add the value of URL and point that to an HTML page, either on the local disk or an external server, and it would actually render that as part of how it was before. Meaning that you could basically manipulate the Outlook FAT client by just setting this registry key. So that is interesting. And when we prepared for this webinar, Chris stumbled upon this knowledge base article from Microsoft itself, where they basically explains a workaround if you have this patch installed and you want to use the web view, where they basically line out the entire thing of how to re-enable the web view client and connect it to an external site or internal site. So that's interesting. So I talked about using this on operations. Early on, when we found this technique in 2018, 2019, we basically, what we did, we stood up a web server. We had a simple a harness that basically didn't do anything. So you can see the only thing that's different from this page and the example from the blog is this also has the refresh part as a meta tag here. That basically means that every 300 seconds, Outlook will refresh the page. So if they're in their inbox, it will refresh every 300 seconds. So that's a way to set the timer for the connection going back to the server. So this will not do anything. It will connect every 300 seconds, do a get to the web server, as we can see in the Apache logs, and nothing happens because there's nothing in the script tag here. It's just an empty harness. Then we would basically just do social engineering on their customers and their users and get them to either run a reg file or run a script or a mock or whatever to set the reg key we needed. And once they did that, we got them to restart Outlook, and then we verified, of course, on the Apache server that we got connections in. That meant we have successfully hooked an agent. So in the early stages, we could actually not hide the top part of the web view. So you can see here I outlined it in red. Like when we used this early on, you could basically right-click there and you can do view source, and you could basically see the entire code that was running in the web viewer. Later on, we found a way to hide this, and that's also part of the tool as we are releasing it. So that's how it looked for the client early on. And what we then did in order to run something was that we swapped out the HTML page to something we wanted to get executed. So in this example here, we are using a function called getProcList, which basically just lists out the processes, and then do a sub function to basically post that back to our web server using a HTTP post, simply base64 encoded, and then we can see the list of processes from that machine. We didn't have an automated way to do this, so we manually had to swap between payloads. So every time we did something like this and collected data, we would swap it out with the blank harness again, and then view the results and add new code, and yeah, back and forth. So that's fine if you have one agent, but if you have multiple agents, that's a pain in the ass, because then you don't know which client is connecting at what time and stuff like that. So that's kind of complex. So this basically had the premise, from what I understood, to be a C2 framework. At this point in time, I was needing to learn a little more Python, because Python is, like most of the offensive tools, are somehow related to Python for the most part. and automation is king. So I used this as an opportunity to learn Python. So I started developing this C2 framework right after Black Hat 2019. We were having a get-together in Vegas, and I got inspired by my coworkers, and I decided to have a go at it and see if I could make a C2 framework. So when you start off creating something, for me at least, it's easier to see if there's something I can like lean on to understand how to build it is better. So I found that Trevor C2 that David Kennedy has released was a great source of inspiration for me, because it had like all the building blocks I kind of needed for my project. So I took a lot of inspiration from that framework and basically just used that as a kind of a boilerplate to my project. The C2 framework got named Specula, and my first alpha release was in October 2019. It was super basic back then. I spent a lot of long nights just trying to figure this out and get it to work. And I used it on an engagement shortly after I created the first working alpha version. And I was super successful on the first engagement where I used this, where I actually managed to hook a couple of agents. So I could basically do like swap out payloads automatically by just typing simple commands in the framework and do it on multiple agents at the same time. So that was super awesome. Then I gathered some knowledge on things I wanted to improve based on the first engagement, and then I started to polish it a bit more, and then I released it to the rest of the team in late December 2019. That became like the first official kind of internal release of the tool. During this time, we actually got discovered using this technique. So we had a coworker of mine that got caught using this specific technique, and Mandiant kind of dissected the entire attack we had going on that customer and ended up writing a blog post about this specific technique. They also had, this is a great blog post, by the way. It has a lot of kind of recommendations on how to stop this and stuff like that. This is just an example from the blog post where this is the macro we ran on that specific engagement to set the registry key. Nothing super exciting there, but they have a lot of great details in that blog post. So again, the technique got detected. You can read more details in the blog post itself. I'm not going to cover that now. This, however, was the manual technique. So this was not the tool that I was developing that got detected. So but still, it was kind of boring that they found it. The cool thing that came out of that for us as a team is that Mandiant decided to categorize us. So they have this APT groups and UNC groups. So UNC is uncategorized threat groups. So we got our own UNC number for this specific technique, UNC 1194. So you'll probably see that on profiles and stuff like that around the TrustedSec people at the targeted ops team. However, this of course didn't stop us. We after the blog post, I decided to just do some adjustments. So based on what they saw they kind of highlighted in the blog post, I adjusted everything so that it became more invisible, so to speak. And I continued to mature the tool and got help from Chris. And we have done like 20 different versions after this with like improvements and stuff like that. So we feel like we have matured it quite a bit from its starting point. And as I have said already, we have used this as like one of our main tools, basically, to get access initially. This is a great initial access vector. It's pretty stealthy. It lives in the Outlook process. It's VB script. Yeah, so we have used it on many engagements over the years. And during the polishing of this tool, we have researched and found additional capabilities, both me and Chris, and Chris is going to cover them in a bit. But before I switch over to Chris, we are going to do a demo. So I'm going to show the tool as it is now, just quickly go over some basic stuff so you know how it looks and how it feels. So yeah. Do you still see my screen with the terminal and stuff?
Yep, you're good.
So. Yeah. Okay, so on the left side, I have Specula running. So this is just the framework running. On the bottom here, I just have a log file that I'm tailing so I can see when something happens. So this is the first thing you see after you have installed and launched Specula. So what we're going to do, we're going to hook an agent because in here now, there's nothing. So we have a module called generate hooker that basically spits out a reg file that you can basically just import on an agent. So I'm going to copy this out. This is a Windows client with an Outlook inbox, nothing special here. So I'm gonna just create a new reg file. Gonna edit that and just paste this in. I'm just gonna, just to be kind of do things correctly, I'm gonna remove the versions that I don't need. The only key we actually need is this one, but these are added as flags and stuff to make the tool work better. So I would just leave those in. Save this, double click, and just do the import. Yes, 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 okay. And the only thing that needs to be done now, as I said before, you need to stop and start Outlook for it to pick up the URL. So I'm gonna stop it, and on the left side, you will hopefully start to see some things happening. If everything works. I didn't sacrifice anything, but yeah, seems it's going. So you don't see a difference here, and the user doesn't notice anything. It's just as it was before. So we are going to do stuff. So the first off, I need to approve the agent. So I'm going to approve it so it becomes a full agent. This is covered in our Wikipedia why we have done it this way. But it's a way to keep things more secure, so to speak, so you don't automatically get approved. What happened now in the backend here is that this agent got an encryption key, set that to the registry, set the new URL, and then it switches the view to the calendar view. When I switch back to the inbox again now, it will pick up the new URL and continue where we left off, but it's a fully agent. So now I can start to run stuff. Now it's fully onboarded. So I was thinking, let's try and use some modules. So first I'm going to interact with it, and then I'm going to use module. As of now, we have 111 different type of modules. So there's quite a lot. So let's do enumerate host list processes. And you can type options here to see if there's any options. This doesn't have any options. So I'm just going to do run. I can do queue list to see, oh, I wasn't fast enough. I set the sleep to 7, so it goes really fast. But you can see at the bottom here, data came back. So I can type data, and then I can see what happened. You can see the process names, the PIDs, the architecture, sometimes the executable path if I have permissions to see so. See that. I'm also going to do another module just for fun. Let's do local admins. Here's one that has an option. So you see the host attribute is something you can specify. At default, this is just a dot, meaning localhost. So I'm just going to run that. I'm going to time it so I can view, so I can show the queue list part. No, I wasn't fast enough. Okay, it ran, came back, and these are the local admins. Other than that, let's say you land on a box and you want to know, does this guy work a lot? Does he have a lot of meetings? So we could basically just try and read the auto calendar, for instance. So by default, it includes the 7 next days. It includes the body of the meeting. So let's just run that. Finally got to show the queue list. So here you can see the list of items. So you can queue up a lot of stuff. And normally you wouldn't have sleep 7. Normally you would have something more stealthy, like every 3 minutes or so. And that's something you can change with the refresh time and jitter and stuff like that. If I press data now, you can see the meetings that this guy has scheduled. You can see he has a meeting tomorrow where he's having PTO. He's going to IKEA with his wife. And he has an important meeting with a client on the 31st, and so on and so forth. One more last thing I'm going to show. We also have an Explorer module, which basically allows us to list the disk. It's super basic as of now. If I do PVD, I can see the current directory. If I do ls, I can do listing of that specific directory. And then I could simply do cd users ls cd Specula demo ls. I am heading into something here, so be patient. ls on the desktop. Currently, we don't have a download module directly here, but there is a cat module. So we could cat the file here that's called password CSV, because that's something you would typically look at if you saw something interesting. So this is us catting that file. If we wanted to, we could download the file instead, and there's modules for that as well. Get file would be the module to use. That is basically what I wanted to show you guys as like an intro to the framework. And I'll let Chris take over from here. Okay, stop share.
All right. Thanks, Oddvar. So I'm going to go ahead and talk through some of the thoughts and ideas that went into, as this framework matured and as we developed it more, what were the limitations we ran up against? How did we work around those? And kind of what you can do with this tool moving forward. So one of the primary limitations we have is that the tool's capabilities are implemented in VBScript. So that kind of limits what we can do because we don't have direct Windows API access. There's not some foreign function interface where we can say, hey, this function exists in this DLL, go call it. Also, we seem to be running on Outlook's main UI thread. So if we do something that takes more than 3, 4, 5 seconds, Outlook will gray out. You'll get that lovely, this process has stopped responding, or there's a script running too long on this page. And it'll be very apparent to the user that something is going wrong with their email client. So we need to think about how we're creating our tasks and make sure that we're not going to interrupt the user experience. The framework itself should be pretty modular and extensible. In this case, what I specifically mean is anyone as a developer of new capabilities for Specula should not be required to understand the entire Specula framework and all of its intricacies. So we'll talk about how extending it is done. And as an end user, someone that just downloads and uses this tool, you shouldn't have to go in and update hard-coded values. So things like, what are those URIs that are used? If I need to redirect someone because they don't have a right user agent, where does that go? That should all be easily configurable by the end user. So some of the advancements that have happened over time, as you saw when Oddvar was doing his demo, you can manually approve agents, or you could have them check in a certain number of times before they get approved. And we switch from basically that blank template that, if IR was doing an investigation, they go out, they pull our web server, they have the correct user agent, they just get a standard template. And it doesn't look malicious, right? It's just like HTML code, has an ActiveX object, like weird, but like, okay, whatever. After it's approved is when we start shipping down the full template. If you were paying close attention, you noticed it didn't even look like that Outlook window was refreshing anymore. And it's actually pulling in the back end and has decryption code so that we're not showing our hand on the network level, but also that approval would have had to occur before all of that extra information gets sent. For our tasks, things like uploading and downloading a file, we've developed those in such a way that they are split up. So we found, take for instance, downloading a file from the client. If you even do that in something as small as like 2, 3, 4 megabyte chunks, that was enough to freeze Outlook. So we limit it to something like 512K, I think, by default. It's customizable. You can flip that out if you find something else works better for you. But we've developed our various capabilities to not run into the blocking issue. And we can actually access the native Windows API, which I'll talk about more in just a moment. For our modular design, if you want to add a new technique or capability to Specula, you need to create 2 files. One is your Python file. That's going to define the entry point of your VBScript function, any options that you have, dependent VBScripts that have, other functions you want to call, or, hooks for return data. You also need your VBScript itself. Obviously, like our capabilities are developed in VBScript, so need to write the VB script that gets sent. By creating those two files that use modules that you saw Oddvar using in his demo, that automatically gets populated. You don't have to go in and manually create, oh, I'm extending the menu system in this way. I'm adding these pieces. Automatically gets pulled out of your .py file. And at a framework level, we present hooks onto the various options that can be set for things like, value transformation, validation, things of that nature. So if you have an option that's like, hey, this takes a URI, we can do that validation. And if the user, tries just setting the number 60, we can throw back a message and say, hey, this doesn't look like it's valid for this option. You need to set something else. So that can help speed up operators that are using the tool after this has been developed. I kind of alluded to the VB script. It's not necessarily good to just write all of your code in one function. That reduces usability and generally speaking, just isn't great programming practice. So you can write your separate functions in separate VB script files and then just call them out as dependencies within your .py file. And then the framework will package those all up and ship them all down, and you can call those from your capabilities VB script. The advantage to doing it that way is if any of those helpers ever have an error, need to be changed, since you weren't copying and pasting this block of code between all these different locations, you update it in one place, propagates the whole framework. And finally, there are those hooks to handle return data. So if you want to do something more complex, you might need to do a task, see what the output of that task is, parse those results, and then tag follow-on tasks. So those hooks exist. It's just a function overload. And then, or override rather. And then you can take that, do follow-on tasking, and do more complex actions. So I mentioned we don't have access to the native Windows API. There's not some foreign function interface. So we're limited to what VB script itself can do. Well, VB script can make registry changes. VB script can write files out to disk, and VB script can interact with any COM object that implements the iDispatch interface. So given that, we can make our own custom COM object. We can plant it on disk, and we can update the registry so that it's properly registered. And at that point, we do have full Windows native API access because we can just write some native code, we can throw it on disk, and we can run it by calling the interface that we ourselves design. So for this initial release, inside of the repo that we're making public, we have an API folder that is a COM or a Visual Studio 2022 project that is an implementation of a COM object that you can deploy through Specula. The first one, or rather what we're releasing publicly, it's relatively simplistic. It can run shell commands. You can do that through VB script anyways, and you can load a DLL from disk. But you're not limited to that. It's meant to serve as a template and give you a starting point if you've never dealt with COM before to further extend and develop your own capabilities. So you could do things that are long running. You could literally spin off a keylogger. It's running its own thread. It's handling those Windows messages, and come back and pull that information yourself later. You're now not blocking the Outlook UI, but able to do a long-running task. Really, your capabilities are kind of endless at this point. So for our defenders, you're not without hope. As we've already mentioned, this is a pretty well-known technique, and it is frankly a little shocking that it still works as well as it does. Hence why we're releasing this tool. VB script itself is getting depreciated and removed as a default feature. So it's first getting moved to an optional feature, and then sometime around 2027, it's going to be turned off by default. So once we hit that point, if Outlook's still around in its current form and you haven't re-enabled VB script, at least in this iteration of how it's being released, this technique wouldn't work. You might have been prompted by Microsoft to switch to the new version of Outlook, typically just a switch in the top right hand of your Outlook window. If you enable that, you're actually flipping to a completely different application. It's not just a UI refresh. So that works more similar to like a packaged web page, like an Electron app, than it does a native Windows 32 application. And at that point, this homepage feature is very well and truly removed. That registry key isn't checked. and it's not going to be rendering a page like this. You could, through your own custom in-house, tool pushing or host management, you could set the security controls such that that web view key could not be written to. Can't be written to, then we can't set a home page, then it can't be used. You can also outright disable web view. There's a blog post that has been released on the TrustedSec page that goes into more detail about some of the registry keys that you can, or not registry keys, group policy preferences that you can set to disable web view and disable Outlook today. And we've also found that using the Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit and applying those recommendations can further prevent this technique. As far as detections, if you want to go back in time or just see if this is being used in your environment, these are the URL keys that you'll want to monitor. For version, that's going to be specific to your environment. If you're using a new version of Outlook or Office 365, that's going to be 16.0. And then you'll be looking at the web view and then subfolders like inbox, drafts, calendar, what have you, or Outlook today. So with that, you can get to our tool release at these two URLs. The first is just a vanity URL. It's specula.rocks. The second is where it's going to redirect you, which is github.com/trustedsec/specula. If you have further questions that we don't get to in this session, these are some of the resources that we're going to make available. So if you join the TrustedSec Discord, which you can at discord.gg/TrustedSec, break out the channel breakouts for InfoSec topic, then you can find the Specula channel. Oddvar and I will be monitoring that and answering questions that come in. We spent a decent amount of time fleshing out our wiki on GitHub. So if you go to the Specula repository on GitHub, then go to the wiki tab, you'll find further documentation that we've written there. We go into some more depth and step-by-step instructions for things like installing, using modules, development, mitigations, all that kind of jazz. You can read our blog post, which is out now at the URL that you see on your screen. If it's not out already, it should be later today. We made a collection of video tutorials. You can find those on the TrustedSec YouTube, which is at TrustedSec TV. And there should also be a playlist being compiled with our 6 tutorial videos, which go through, again, installation, usage of modules, how to hook a client, development, and development of that COM API. And finally, the tool itself can, again, be found at specula.rocks or github.com/trustedsec/specula. So with that, we'll go ahead and start going through our Q&A. So the modules are written in those 2 components. So the server-side component is written in Python. The client-side component is written in VB script. You don't have to write that entire task template. So you're not writing the HTML code or putting the block. That's handled at the framework level. You just write your VB script function and then call out in the Python file what the entry point of that function is.
Sweet. Can this be used to download and run another implant? Cobalt Strike Empire. Yes. That is correct.
Yeah.
You could either just put files on disk and run it through a spawn process or stuff like that, or you could basically extend the API as we discussed with your own kind of loader or something like that. There's also the load DLL code in the current example that you can use to load the DLL if you want. So yeah.
Yeah, we frequently, like I said, this is a great initial access technique because you're not necessarily sending someone something that's immediately going to run an executable. You don't have to restart Outlook the moment that this gets set. So you could have that registry key get set. And then like, I don't know, whenever the computer restarts, user logs off, logs back in, sometime later, we have access. We have access through a trust process. And we can use that for like the initial host enumeration, all that kind of jazz. So yeah. Does this require local admin to revert the reg key? Nope. Nope, just like how we can set it as a normal user, it can be reverted as a normal user. It's just under that HKCU, so it's within the user's control. Yeah, how keyed are in our defenders to this TTP? Oddvar, had we run into a client that before we tested them, they had this detected?
No, I don't think so. We have had issues where we have used specific things over and over again that got kind of detected in the end, but it's really, really specific to us, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think like there's a generic detection that I've seen at least.
Yeah.
But
And
again, it all depends on configuration. I mean, if you turn on all the bells and whistles of all the different tools, I'm pretty sure you will see something and probably detect something. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, I believe we've gotten called out after the fact a few times. But I believe that was more use due to like modules and follow-on files dropped and then they followed it back. Yeah, again, kind of the reason why we're releasing this is it has been surprising for something that has a CVE from 2017 that this has been as successful as it has been.
I heard that the TS research team adds a get system module to all their tools, but I don't. You know what?
You know,
What
we
do-
keep that internal, so
Yeah.
sorry.
Will this blue screen crowds like 100%? Yes, it will. No. Do you have a specific URL or title to blog entry on disabling web view with registry? Yeah. So our blog post, I'm gonna type the
Yeah,
answer.
you want to find the URL
Yep.
and
So, oh, I just answered it. It should be in the answer now, but basically we have, I can share the screen real quick. I can try to share the screen real quick.
oh yeah. There you go.
Sure. So we have this blog post that just got released like an hour ago or half an hour ago or something. It goes over all the details on how it works, the framework we have released, and also how to prevent in terms of settings you need to set with group policy and stuff like that, and also detections. So everything should be here. If there's anything you need, you can always hit us up on the Discord channel at least. Yep. I think we're through the questions.
All right. Oh, special call out to Carlos Perez. I want to thank him for editing all of the videos that'll be going up on YouTube. He spent a significant amount of time getting those cleaned up and looking very nice. So just wanted to give him some credit for that. Otherwise, yeah, thank you all for taking the time out of your day to attend. I hope that you found this tool release to be exciting and hit us up on Discord and let us know what you think.
Bye-bye.